An orphan millionaire saw an 18-years-old girl leave a newborn. Like trash, his voice shook. "Stay with me till the very end, and let me know where you're watching from, so I can see how far the truth really spreads." His voice echoed in her skull like a wound that would not close. "You disgust me. Even animals protect their young, but you were ready to throw this one away like garbage. No child deserves a mother like you." Hannah Carter staggered in that memory, the words striking harder than fists, her arms tightening around Noah. She had wanted to scream the truth, that she was only 18, that this baby was not hers, that she had already buried the sister who raised her. But her lips had locked shut, and the shame had burned too deep. Only weeks earlier, life had looked so different. She had walked across a stage in her graduation gown, her smile bright against the summer sky. Grace had clapped with both hands, her belly round with hope, her laughter carrying louder than anyone else's. Hannah had believed the world was opening, that the two of them would step into the future together. She never imagined how fragile joy could be, or how fast it could shatter. That night at the hospital, chaos drowned everything. Nurses hurried past, alarms screamed, and behind the delivery room doors, Grace's life slipped away. Hannah sat frozen in the hallway, her hands pressed together until her knuckles ached, whispering prayers that went unanswered. When the doctor came out with downcast eyes, the floor seemed to vanish beneath her. Grace was gone. Only the baby had survived. Hannah stumbled into the cold room, her vision blurred by tears. The infant's cry split the air, raw and relentless, demanding a mother who could no longer answer. Hannah's arms trembled as she lifted him, his body smaller than she imagined, his warmth sinking into her skin. She held him tight, terrified of what it meant, terrified of letting go. At the funeral, rain poured in sheets against a forest of black umbrellas. Pitying voices surrounded her, urging her to surrender the child to the state. Too young, too foolish, they said. But Hannah's gaze never left Noah's hand as his tiny fingers curled around her own. Fear gnawed at her, grief hollowed her, but the memory of Grace's love steadied her spine. Against the storm, she bent her lips to the baby's ear and whispered a vow. "They may not want you, but I will never let you go." Grace had not been her blood sister, but in every way that mattered she had been family. Years ago, when Hannah was abandoned by her parents, it was Grace who reached out, offering a place to sleep and a hand to hold. They laughed, fought, and shared secrets like real sisters, bound not by blood but by choice. Losing her was not just losing family, it was losing the only anchor Hannah had ever known. Now the baby she left behind was fighting his own battle. Born too early, Noah lay in an incubator surrounded by wires and soft beeping monitors. His skin was translucent, his breaths uneven. Hannah stood by the glass, guilt and awe warring inside her. She was only 18, yet here she was, signing her name as guardian for a child who had no mother left to hold him. The hospital staff tried to help, but their kindness came with reality. Noah needed round-the-clock care. During the day, Hannah left him in the hands of nurses so she could drag herself to classes. She sat in lecture halls with red eyes, her notebook filled with half-finished notes and tiny drawings of Noah she sketched to stay awake. At night, she returned to the hospital, curling into the chair beside the incubator, whispering lullabies into the sterile air. Sometimes she dozed with her forehead pressed against the glass, dreaming of Grace's voice telling her to be strong. Money slipped through her fingers. She worked at the campus cafe, but each paycheck dissolved into hospital bills, diapers, and formula. Some nights she went hungry, staring at vending machines she could not afford, while Noah's cries echoed in her head. Friends disappeared. Professors shook their heads, and the girl who once smiled in her cap and gown now looked like she carried the weight of the world. One night, drained and desperate, Hannah found herself again in the nursery ward. Rows of infants slept peacefully, nurses gliding between them with practiced ease. She held Noah close, his body warm and restless against her chest. For one aching second, she thought of leaving him there, safe in the arms of people who knew what to do. But then his tiny hand brushed her collarbone, and guilt slashed through her. She could not walk away. She could not abandon him. The nursery lights burned against Hannah's swollen eyes. She stood with Noah pressed to her chest, torn between leaving and staying, her body locked in a battle she could not win. For a fleeting moment, she imagined setting him down inside the glass room, where rows of babies slept under gentle care. The thought made her knees weaken. A sharp voice shattered the silence. "So this is who you are, ready to abandon him while strangers do the work. You disgust me." Hannah spun around, startled, and found a man in a tailored suit standing at the doorway. His eyes were fire, his jaw clenched with fury. Yet behind the blaze there flickered something else, something raw, like a scar breaking open. Ethan Whitmore had come that night for charity photographs, prepared to wear the smile the world expected. But when he saw Hannah clutching a baby with hesitation in her stance, the ground shifted under him. Her face blurred into the memory of a night long ago, when he had been the one left crying in the dark, waiting for a mother who never came. The rage he thought he had buried roared back, spilling out of him before he could stop it. His words lashed her like a whip. "Girls like you do not deserve children. Better to hand him to the system than raise him in your shadow of weakness." Hannah's throat closed. She wanted to scream that Noah was not hers, that she had just buried her sister, that she was drowning and still trying to stand. But the venom in his voice pinned her down, stealing her breath. Noah whimpered, his small fists waving against her chest, and Hannah broke. Tears blurred her vision as she pulled him tighter and fled down the hall, her footsteps squeaking across the polished floor. She did not dare look back, too ashamed, too terrified he might see the truth written in her eyes. Ethan stood rooted in place, his fists clenched. He told himself she was nothing but another coward, another selfish soul who would rather walk away than fight for a child. Yet even as the anger burned, the old scar throbbed, reminding him why her face had cut so deep. He turned back toward the glass, watching the sleeping infants, and the ache in his chest refused to let go. The apartment Hannah rented was barely more than a box with peeling paint and a leaking faucet. At night, the radiator rattled so loud she could not tell if it was the machine or her own heartbeat keeping her awake. Noah's crib was nothing but a second-hand basket lined with a thin blanket. She tried to study with textbooks spread on the floor, but every time Noah coughed or whimpered, she dropped her pen and gathered him in trembling arms. The girl who once dreamed of lecture halls and bright futures now measured her days in bottles, fevers, and sleepless nights. The breaking point came when Noah's skin burned like fire against her cheek. His breaths were shallow, his cries fading to a weak rasp. Hannah's panic swallowed her whole. She wrapped him in her only warm coat and ran into the freezing night, her shoes slapping against the wet pavement. Her tears blurred the streetlights as she begged God not to take him too. By the time she burst into the hospital, her arms were numb, her chest heaving with sobs she could not hold back. Nurses rushed him away, and Hannah stood helpless in the hallway, her body shaking as if it might collapse. That was when she felt it again, the piercing gaze that had haunted her since the nursery. Ethan Whitmore's tall frame loomed at the corner, his suit crisp, his eyes sharp with judgment. He looked at her as though she were proof of everything he hated. His words cut like glass. "Some people should never be allowed near a child. You are drowning, and you are dragging him down with you." Hannah's lips parted, but nothing came out. Her throat was raw from crying, her spirit too shattered to defend herself. She wanted to beg him to see her heart, to know she had given up everything for this child who was not even her own. Instead, she lowered her eyes, clutched the strap of her worn bag, and let the shame sink like stone in her chest. Behind the doors, Noah whimpered as machines beeped. Hannah pressed her forehead against the cold wall, whispering Grace's name like a prayer. She was too young, too poor, too alone. But even as the world spat its verdict, she knew one truth. She would rather break 1,000 times than walk away from him. Hannah's savings vanished faster than she could earn them. Hospital bills stacked on the kitchen counter, rent notices slipped under her door, and every dollar from her cafe shifts dissolved into formula and medicine. One afternoon, while searching for another job, she saw an ad for temporary assistance at Whitmore Enterprises. She hesitated, her chest tightening at the familiar name. But desperation drowned hesitation. She walked into the gleaming glass building, her worn shoes squeaking on the polished floor. When she entered the interview room, the air froze. Behind the desk sat Ethan Whitmore. His expression hardened the moment he recognized her, eyes narrowing with the same cold fire she had felt in the hospital. For a moment, Hannah thought he might throw her out. Instead, he leaned back, lips curling into a thin line, and nodded. He would let her stay, not out of mercy, but out of something darker. From the first day, Ethan made her life a gauntlet. He sent her carrying heavy boxes of files, up and down endless flights of stairs, though the building had elevators. He ordered her to fetch coffee only to sneer when it was not hot enough. Meetings stretched late into the night, and he piled tasks on her desk with no concern that she had a sick infant waiting at home. Every command felt like another test she was meant to fail. But Hannah did not break. Her legs trembled under the weight of boxes, her hands blistered from scrubbing conference tables, but she kept moving. At night, she returned to Noah, her body aching, her voice cracked from exhaustion, yet she still whispered lullabies as if nothing else mattered. Each bruise, each insult, each sleepless hour was another brick in the wall she was building to protect him. The staff at Whitmore Enterprises whispered behind her back. Some pitied her, others laughed at her clumsiness. Ethan watched from his office window, his eyes cold, convinced she would eventually quit or crumble. Yet she never did. He saw her stumble, but he also saw her straighten. He heard her voice shake, but he also heard her steady it. For reasons he refused to name, her persistence gnawed at him, even as he told himself she was nothing more than a reckless girl pretending to be strong. One night, as she left the office long after midnight, her body sagged with fatigue. The city lights blurred in her tired eyes, and her reflection in the glass doors looked like a stranger. Still, she whispered to herself the promise she had made at Grace's funeral. No matter how much it hurt, she would not let Noah go. She would endure anything, even the cruelty of the man who despised her. Late one evening, Ethan walked through the dim halls of his company. Most of the staff had gone home, leaving only the hum of machines and the faint glow of office lights. He pushed open the door to the employee lounge, expecting it to be empty. Instead, he stopped cold. Hannah sat curled on the worn couch, her head bowed. Noah nestled against her chest. She was trying to feed him quietly, her hair falling loose around her pale face. Her eyes looked hollow from sleepless nights, yet her hands were steady and gentle. She whispered soft words to the baby, words Ethan could not make out, but the tenderness in her voice carried across the room. For the first time, he did not see the reckless girl he despised. He saw a child raising another child, holding on with everything she had. The sight cracked something buried deep inside him. Memories surged, uninvited and sharp. He remembered the orphanage, rows of metal cribs, the cries of infants echoing in cold rooms. He remembered the night he realized no one was coming back for him, the sound of another boy whispering that they had been abandoned. Rage and loneliness had been his companions ever since. Watching Hannah rock, the baby stirred the ache he had spent years trying to bury. He turned to leave, but the shuffle of footsteps stopped him. Mrs. Harris, his longtime housekeeper and the only person who dared speak truth to him, stepped quietly into the lounge. She placed a gentle hand on his arm, her eyes following his gaze. Her voice was low but firm. "That child is not hers. She is only 18, and yet she chose to keep him when no one else would." Ethan's chest tightened. He stared at Hannah again, this time with new eyes. The girl he had branded as selfish and careless had carried a burden she never asked for. She had no reason to stay, yet she stayed. The shame hit him harder than his anger ever had. He had called her unfit, unworthy, but she had been stronger than most people he knew. He stepped back into the shadows, unable to face her, unable to face himself. His throat burned with words he could not speak. For the first time in years, he felt something that scared him more than rage. He felt compassion. The meeting room was silent, except for the sound of papers sliding across the table. Hannah's mistake was small, a misfiled report, but the client seized on it like a weapon. His voice rose, accusing her of incompetence, demanding accountability. Hannah stood stiffly, her cheeks flushed, her eyes burning as every word cut deeper than the last. Ethan sat at the head of the table, his face unreadable. When the client finished, Ethan spoke with a calmness that stung more than shouting. He said the failure belonged to his assistant. He said it was her carelessness that jeopardized the trust of their partners. Hannah's chest heaved, her throat closing as tears spilled despite her effort to hold them back. She broke, her voice trembling. "I am trying. Not for myself, for a child who has no one else." The words hung in the air, raw and desperate, before she turned and fled the room. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he did not call her back. He sat in silence as the echo of her voice lingered, the truth clawing at the armor he wore. Days later, the storm returned in a form more cruel than any meeting. Noah grew ill, his cough turning sharp, his tiny body burning with fever. Hannah rushed him to the hospital, her heart pounding with dread. The diagnosis was pneumonia, and the doctor's words blurred through the roar in her ears. The bills piled higher than she could imagine. Her wallet was empty, her options gone. She sat in the hallway outside Noah's room, her body folded in on itself, hands shaking against her knees. Every sound from the room felt like a knife. The beep of the monitors, the rustle of nurses, the soft whimper of her nephew fighting for breath. Hannah whispered Grace's name, praying for strength, but all she felt was failure, pressing down like a weight she could not escape. A shadow fell across her, and she looked up through blurred vision. Ethan stood there, tall and composed, but his eyes were no longer ice. He lowered himself into the chair beside her, the distance between them shrinking in the quiet. He did not offer words of pity. He did not scold. Instead, he pulled out his wallet, set a credit card on the bench between them, and spoke low. "No child deserves to feel abandoned." Hannah's breath caught. Her hand hovered over the card, trembling, torn between pride and despair. For the first time, Ethan's words did not slice. They carried something else, something she had not seen before: compassion. The days after Noah's hospital stay carried a different rhythm. Ethan no longer barked orders or set traps to see Hannah fail. Instead, he began shifting tasks, easing the heaviest loads from her desk, quietly arranging her schedule so she could leave earlier. He did not announce his change, but Hannah noticed when her evenings became hers again, when she could rush to Noah without fear of losing her job. One afternoon, she returned to the office to pick up forgotten papers and found Ethan in the break room. He was holding Noah awkwardly, the baby wriggling in his arms, while Mrs. Harris coached from the side. His grip was stiff, his suit creased, but when Noah reached for his tie and gurgled a laugh, something broke through. Ethan laughed too, short and startled, as if he had not remembered the sound of it. Hannah stood in the doorway, frozen, watching the man she once feared look almost human. Later that evening, while Noah slept in his carrier, Hannah and Ethan sat in the quiet office. She told him about Grace, how her sister had taken her in when her own parents turned away, how Grace had been the anchor that saved her from growing up alone. Her voice wavered, but did not break, and for the first time, Ethan listened without interruption. His eyes stayed on her, dark and unreadable, yet softer than she had ever seen. In the silence that followed, he thought of his own childhood. The nights in the orphanage when no one came, the mornings when he pretended he did not care. He saw in Hannah the same desperate strength he once fought to find. They were both children who had been left behind, scraping for survival in different ways. For years, his armor had been wealth and power. For her, it was love that refused to let go. When Noah stirred, Ethan leaned over with surprising gentleness, placing a blanket across the baby's chest. Hannah's lips trembled into a smile, and Ethan caught it before she turned away. He said nothing, but the shift between them was undeniable. The line between enemy and ally had blurred, replaced by something fragile, something new. For the first time, Hannah felt she was not standing alone. And for the first time, Ethan allowed himself to believe that maybe he did not have to be alone either. Hannah sat at her small desk, the acceptance letter from the university crumpled between her fingers. She whispered to herself that school no longer mattered. Noah needed her more than any dream, and she would give up everything if that meant he would be safe. Her voice cracked, but her resolve felt final. When Ethan entered the apartment later that evening, he noticed the letter shoved into a drawer. He pulled it free and read the heading, his expression darkening. He asked why she would bury her future like this. Hannah broke, confessing through tears that she could not keep up anymore, that the weight of classes, bills, and motherhood was crushing her. She whispered that she had no choice. Ethan's silence stretched, heavy and cutting. Then he shook his head, his voice steady but fierce. "You will not give up school. I will take care of the bills, the childcare, whatever it takes." And then his tone shifted, softer but raw, carrying the wound of his own past. "I know what it means to grow up without choices. I will not let that happen to you." The words shattered her defenses. Tears poured down Hannah's face as she clutched Noah tightly to her chest, her body shaking with sobs she could not contain. She felt as if someone had finally seen her, not as a failure, not as a burden, but as a girl who still deserved a future. Ethan stepped closer, uncertain, his movements hesitant. He did not try to silence her cries. He only placed a steady hand on her shoulder, his warmth anchoring her as she wept. Hannah lifted her tear-streaked face and met his gaze. No words of love were spoken, but the look in his eyes told her everything. He understood what it meant to be broken and still choose to stay. In that gaze, she felt the weight of hope for the first time in a long time. A year passed, and the world looked different. Hannah walked across the campus courtyard, books pressed to her chest, her steps steady with purpose. She still worked nights, still studied through exhaustion, but her eyes carried light again. Beside her, Noah toddled forward, his little hands reaching out, his voice bright as he called her mama for the first time. The word broke her open in the best way, a gift she never thought she would hear. At the opening ceremony for the new school year, Hannah spotted Ethan in the crowd. He stood tall, holding Noah easily on his hip, as if the boy belonged there. Noah giggled, tugging at Ethan's collar, and Ethan only laughed, the sound warm and unguarded. Hannah felt her chest ache, not with fear or shame, but with something gentler, gratitude. When the speeches ended and the students began to scatter, Ethan walked to her side. They did not speak, but their eyes met, and everything that needed to be said was carried in that look. Noah wriggled in his arms, reaching for Hannah, and Ethan shifted, handing the boy to her with a smile that was quiet but certain. Together, they turned toward the path that stretched across the courtyard. The late afternoon sun bathed them in gold, their shadows stretching long across the ground. Hannah held Noah close, Ethan walking at her side, the three of them moving forward as if they had always belonged together. And in that moment, the truth rang clear. Family is not about blood. Family is about the ones who choose to stay. If this story touched your heart, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to Emotional Echoes, the place where true accounts and moving fiction come together to heal, uplift, and remind us of life's deepest values. Until next time, take care of yourself and keep your heart open. Don't forget to subscribe Emotional Echoes for more soul-stirring stories. Thanks for listening.